Great to be with you here today. Springtime in Minnesota, I thought it was snowing on Tuesday at 84 degrees yesterday. See what's next, but this is what's so precious about our state is the commitment that all of you have, and so many other Minnesotans, to our resources, and to the quality of what we have given to us, and now our responsibility for protecting it, preserving it, enhancing it in the future. When my father just passed away last November, 97 years old. He took a piece of property out in Long Lake, Minnesota, and restored it, took some shrub forest and restored that, and burned the shrub and put one of the last natural prairies, restored one of the last natural prairies in Minnesota, and a number of other things, and we spent our Sundays together the last 5 years ago. I had lunch with him, and I could see his decline. I said, Dad, you've been a really good steward of your property. You took what you bought, 170 acres back in 1950 for a couple $100 an acre, and you made it better, and you left it better. You donated it to the state of Minnesota, to the DNR, as a urban park, and that's a responsibility that I think I hope I inherited from him, that I think all of you feel, is that we are the recipients of what was bequeathed to us, depending on what you choose, care, believe, but is our responsibility, what we got from our parents, our grandparents, and what we have acquired ourselves. And then we have a responsibility to use that wisely, and for ourselves and for our families, for our lives, our livelihoods, but also to be conscious of how what we're doing with those resources affects the lives of other people, those who are living here in Minnesota today, and those who are going to be following us in years to come. And I know that all of you, I'm preaching to the choir here today, so I'll start with that recognition, and I know that all of you have been leaders in our struggle to preserve clean, safe water for all Minnesotans, and to return it to those who have lost it. And I thank you. I thank you for your leadership, and for your integrity, and for your courage. It's not easy to tell people what they don't want to hear. It's not easy to confront people with the consequences of their actions. It's not easy to get people to change when they are denied their individual responsibility, and when frankly prefer that everyone else just change their ways so that they won't have to change their own. Believe me, I know that from experience. We're talking about good people. The overwhelming majority of the people we're talking about are good Minnesotans who are doing their best to be good citizens, earn decent livings, live their lives, and raise their families. With just a few exceptions, there are no villains in this story. And the other reality is that with a few exceptions, we're all responsible for the impingement and infringement upon our state's water quality. In the comic strip Pogo, he said once, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." I'd prefer to say we have met the culprits, and he and she are us. Who among us cannot look back upon the last week or month and not find a time when we've used too much water, or conserved too little, or been part of some larger enterprise that has adversely affected our water quality? I know I have. So this is not an exercise in holier than thou. On the other hand, it is no longer responsible for us to look the other way and ignore the facts of what is happening around us. They did that in Flint, Michigan. It's my responsibility, and it's all Minnesota's responsibility, to assure that catastrophe is not repeated here in Minnesota. There are a couple of contradictory trends here. One is that as a state we're doing more and more to protect and improve our water quality. We're spending more and more public and private resources to achieve these important goals. The second, however, is that water quality conditions are getting worse in many parts of our state. For too many Minnesotans, their water is less clean, less safe, and less affordable. This is a water that Minnesotans and their families drink, which they use for daily washing and bathing, which they use in their work, and which they depend upon for their recreation. In short, it is a key ingredient in their lives and in their quality of life, and it's getting worse in too many places. Those two contradictions mean two things to me. One, we're not doing enough to correct the problems. And two, we're doing too much to cause the problems. Those are simple conclusions. As you know, in our complex environment, there are often not simple resolutions. And there are often not an easy consensus to reach about them. Obviously, we learned that lesson in the last legislative session around the buffer legislation. I'm the buffer bully. I've been called much worse. The outcome was far from perfect. It's been criticized as both inadequate and excessive. But it provided one more step toward the responsible stewardship of our natural resources. Some of the objections to it were instructive about the attitudes people have toward their properties, toward their lives, and toward their neighbors. I heard a lot about private property rights. It's my land, and I have the right to do whatever I want on it, do it with it. Whereas a private ditch, as in my ditch, and no one has the right to tell me what I can or can't put in it, or have to do or not to do to put around it. Well, to a great extent, I agree with those views. Private property rights are essential rights of Minnesotans and all Americans. They're part of the personal protections which are embedded in our U.S. and Minnesota constitutions. Many people have spent their entire lives on their properties. Their families have spent generations living on those properties. And they're deservedly sensitive to anyone telling them what they can or can't do on them. But it becomes a different situation when the consequences of what is done there affects other people not living on that property. It may be a private ditch on private property. However, if and when the contents of that ditch travel to a public ditch, which then flows into a public lake or river, at what point do others have a right to question its contents and to object when they cause unhelpful effects on their water, land, animals, or their own bodies? The chemicals or animal manure spread upon farmers' open field are properly his or her own concern. The tiling and other measures to distribute those chemicals throughout the soil to maximize productivity are private business decisions. But when they filter into groundwater that contaminates neighbors' wells or neighboring towns' water supplies, they are no longer private concerns. When a suburban neighborhood consumes too much water to green its lawns, or spruce up the country club's golf course, and drains the lakes and aquifers upon which others depend, at what point does someone need to intervene and say, that's enough? At what point do the waters emitting from industrial processes, which provide hundreds of essential jobs, as well as important products for all of us, be regulated or restricted? When doing so might compromise or even jeopardize those livelihoods. But when not doing so, might compromise or jeopardize the environment around them. Those are very hard issues with which we're dealing. So I want Minnesotans to spend the next year focusing on these problems and on the solutions to them. So I'm proclaiming that a year beginning July 4th of 2016 shall be a year of safe water action in Minnesota. It begins for me on July 4th, 4th of July appropriately, Patriots Day, Parade in Delaware, Minnesota. It's going to continue as part of my 87 counties in 86 days, from August through October, all over the state. In 2010, I went 87 counties in 87 days. I said, this year I'm going to pick up the pace. I'm going to do everything I can throughout the state as part of that travel, to increase public awareness by everybody about water quality in Minnesota, and to develop an action agenda for everyone in Minnesota, for local governments, stormwater conservation districts, for community organizations, state and local, for every family, every farm, every business, and every school in Minnesota, leading into the legislative session in 2017. And that will be important because there's much more we need to do in that session. But it is not the solution. More laws and regulations and rules are probably necessary because, as James Madison said, if men were angels, government would not be necessary. But they're not enough by themselves. What we really need to do in Minnesota is establish and advance an ethic of responsibility, personal responsibility for how our actions, our behaviors affect the lives of those around us. A recognition of what I do affects everyone else. And it's not mine if it affects the lives of other people. And it's my responsibility to change if it adversely affects the lives of other people. We can still have the best of what we want in Minnesota. We can make it better, in fact, by behaving responsibly, by being wise stewards, by conserving with a consciousness that we have that broader responsibility. I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I'm not trying to take away anybody's property, or their livelihood, or their profits, or their happiness, or anything else that they value and treasure about Minnesota. But I want to preserve all of that for everyone. And that's my responsibility as the chief executive of the state. That's your responsibility as citizens of the state. And it's all of us working together. It's not just me. It's not just the legislature. It's not just elected officials. It's all of us working together. It's going to be necessary to accomplish that. So this is a broad year of safe water action throughout Minnesota. This is a broad year of what we can all do, pooling our best ideas and talents and expertise and our knowledge and our resources together to attack this problem, to face up to it and say there will be no Flint, Michigans here in Minnesota, not in Minneapolis, not in St. Paul, not in Adrian, not in International Falls, not anywhere. We're not going to let that happen in Minnesota. We're going to face the reality of the situation we have. We're going to use the expertise we have. We're going to use the best judgment, the resources we have available, and we're going to make a difference. We're going to make a huge difference, and we're going to clean up the water. We're going to clean up our act in Minnesota. And we're going to clean up our act for ourselves and for our kids and for our grandkids. And that's my commitment to working with you. I hope you're excited about that as I am. This is getting started. Welcome your ideas, suggestions, most of all your involvement, your support. And over the next couple of months, my office will be reaching out, soliciting your ideas and suggestions for what we can do to kick this project off July 4th and following thereafter over the next months all over Minnesota. What can we do everywhere? To broaden public awareness about the quality of our water, the responsibility we all have for it, and what we can all do working together to make it better. Thank you very much.
That was cool. The governor was unable to take questions. He's got a legislature's in session. He needs to get back there and play ringmaster, I think, at times. A few things here. I picked up a couple things out of his talk that resonated with me. And one of those little phrases he threw in there was, he's not trying to be holier than thou. We all have a part in the solution, but we're also part of the problem. And that our involvement in it just makes it all the more clear that there aren't simple solutions to the stuff that we still face. I mean, we've made huge gains from what we were seeing in the 60s. Huge gains. And what's left is the hard stuff. And he was right. It does involve a ton of trade-offs of this versus that, or a little bit less of this, so I can have a little bit more of that. And when those trade-offs happen down at the Capitol, we need to be involved. You've all got a senator, you've all got a state representative. You've got a crew of 5 county commissioners. You've got access to a lot of people that you work with for your normal day jobs, which matters an awful lot, but also for your water jobs and your community jobs. And talk to those people. A lot of them are coming up for election this November. It's a good time to ask this summer, it's like, where do you stand on this issue? What do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And listen to what they say. One of our earlier sessions today, Tim Hool was talking upstairs and pretty much said the way not to do it was to walk up with him and point at him and say, I can't believe you did it, and then expect him to turn around and want to work with you. I've tried that, it doesn't work. So, yeah, get in the game. This is an uncommonly fertile time to get in the game. A couple of last announcements here. We do ask you to fill out those evaluations. You'll get 2 things if you fill out that evaluation and turn it in. Number 1, you'll get a weather guide calendar, which is a $20 value in January. About this time of year, I'm thinking you're getting away about $15. Secondly, I want to remind you, there is a huge table of desserts up here. If the food is, if you've been thinking the food's not so good, go ahead and grab another dessert. We've heard a lot of good words about the food up here. The last thing that I've got up here is the folks wanted me to tell if there was a silver earring turned in. If you're missing a silver earring, Tim Hool, Dave Wyron, Dan Stoddard, if you're missing earring, it's at the registration table out front. And everybody, thank you for coming. This has been a wonderful 2 days, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks.